Hello everybody, I'm super excited today to finally be reviewing the DC Multiverse McFarlane Toys Michael Keaton Batman from The Flash movie. Now, if you're a long-time viewer of my channel, you'll know I'm a pretty big Batman fan, and in particular, I adore the Michael Keaton Batman, so I'm super psyched for this new Flash film. And I'll be totally honest, I have very little interest in the Flash himself. For me, it's all about Batman, and we know there's a couple of Batmen at least appearing in this film, but for me the most important element is the fact that Michael Keaton is returning to the role of Batman after nearly 30 years. And this is really good news for toy fans and fans of the Tim Burton era Batman, because it means we're getting a whole host of brand new toys based on this version of the character. And today I'm going to be looking at McFarlane Toys' 7-inch scale offering. I should point out that McFarlane Toys has produced two variants of this figure, one masked and one unmasked. Although, to be honest, looking at this unmasked photo here, I'm not entirely convinced by this head sculpt, but perhaps I'd feel differently if I had it in hand. But today I'm going to be looking at the masked version. Okay, so let's start off by taking a look at the packaging. If you've picked up any other McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse line figures, this is going to look very, very familiar. It's quite bland. I've never been a big fan of it. I complain about it in pretty much every video that I do, that it's just a little bit uninspiring and a bit boring, really. It's just black borders. In the background, in that interior inlay, we have a sort of collage of images from comic book pages in that blue and white, which I think is quite attractive. It helps make the figure pop out the packaging in that window display. But that's all there is to it, really. If we look at the side panel, again, this is quite a thick, chunky package. Quite a lot of space here to do something creative with and quite fun, but nah, there's nothing really. It's just text, it's just telling you who the character is, and they're not putting anything on here. And it would have been nice, I always think, if they put, a profile image of the character, whether it's an illustrated image or a photo of the figure itself. Look quite nice when you put it on display, if you stack them up on your shelf side by side, but alas, it's not meant to be. If we look at the reverse of the packaging, though, we do have this image of Batman here, and this is mostly text-free. There's very little text on this packaging, which is nice. This is quite attractive. You can put this on display, and it looks really good. My only gripe here is that they've gone for an illustrated image. This is something that's obviously been hand-drawn. I have no issue with that, really, when it comes to comic book figures. As this is based on a film, this is strange they haven't gone for a production still, perhaps, and I'm just speculating here, they didn't have still sent them in time to get these out to market. It probably ahead of schedule, so they've had to kind of go off descriptions, I suppose. So yeah, a little bit disappointed they weren't able to put an image on here, but nevertheless, this is still fine. It just looks very cartoonish, very sort of child orientated, which might be part of the thinking. When the first production photos of this figure were released, I have to admit I was a little bit skeptical. I wasn't overly impressed with how plastic looking this figure was and how shiny it is, but I have to say I love this figure, and McFarlane Toys have done a fantastic job. However, I am going to start with the criticism, because I'm looking at the head sculpt here and I'm not really seeing a distinct likeness to Michael Keaton. This looks far too young to be this version of Michael Keaton, obviously a lot older in this film than he was in the 89 Batman, but at the same time, it doesn't even really resemble a young Michael Keaton either to my eyes. So this is a little bit indistinct, a little bit generic, I feel. It doesn't really feel like it's caught the likeness particularly well, and that's unusual because I do feel like McFarlane Toys usually do a very good job of capturing the likenesses of their various Batmen. So this is unusual and a bit surprising, a little bit disappointing, because it's quite soft. But don't worry, from here on out things get much, much better, and I have to say I've been very pleasantly surprised by the costume and the materials they've used on this figure. So initially I was a little bit concerned that it looked too shiny, a little bit too plastic looking, and certainly yes, that is true. It doesn't have a rubber texture, it is a very shiny sort of plastic material, but it actually works really well. Now, I don't have any photo references of Michael Keaton's costume from The Flash. Obviously this is an updated costume. This isn't meant to be the same one as we saw in the 89 film or even the follow-up Batman Returns. It is a brand new costume, and we do see it still in the trailer actually of him having lots of different costumes on display there. So I'm assuming that this is pretty accurate to what we're going to see in the Flash film, and I have to say I really like it. Now, it has a lot more armoured kind of pieces to it, but that kind of makes sense. It's kind of in keeping with what we've seen in recent years, so it feels like an updated version of what we got in the late 80s, early 90s. And although there's minimal paint apps on this figure, most of it is just moulded in that base plastic, I have to say it looks pretty good and pretty effective, and I like that there's actually still plenty of detailing in the armour pieces and joints and cracks and grooves. One place where we do see some extra paint apps though is on the boots and on those shin pads, where we can see this sort of brown wash being added to these boots to create that sense of, I suppose, mud or dirt. I guess this is going to speak to some sequence that we see in the film, but this is really cool. It gives it a lot more texture, makes it feel a bit more realistic, and just adds a little bit more detail to this figure overall. Now, the pièce de résistance for me, the thing that really makes this figure pop, is this wonderful cape that they're giving him. Finally, McFarlane Toys have got away from those rubber or plastic capes that they tend to stick on these figures, but this is completely different. This is a cloth cotton cape. Of course, it's completely malleable and flexible. There's no ridging or wiring in it, but it still looks really, really awesome, and it adds a lovely extra texture and dimension to this figure. The great thing about it as well is that it is big enough to be able to wrap around him. Now, it doesn't close quite tightly, you can't get it all the way there, but it does a pretty decent job. I love this. I think this is really effective. I'm surprised they haven't thought to do this before. Now, we did get it with the McFarlane Toys Batman Year 2 offering a few years ago. That was, again, very effective. I just wish they'd done it a lot more on some of their other figures. Okay, so let's look at the articulation. There is a ball joint in the top of the neck here, which allows the head to move all the way around, sort of wobble from side to side, but also look up and down a pretty decent distance as well. In the shoulder area, you'll notice there is this ball joint here that actually works as a butterfly wing joint, so that arm can bend backwards and forwards a little bit as well, giving it extra room for motion, which is brilliant. There is another ball joint inside there that allows the arm to kick up and out. Now, I did notice mine wouldn't really go all the way up, which is a shame, but it's still got a pretty good, decent range of motion here. There's a complementary bicep swivel, double joint in the elbows, and then we have another ball joint at the wrist there, so the hand can rotate all the way around, and there is a hinge on it as well that will allow it to lean forwards and backwards. Now, there's two joints in the torso, one in the top of the chest area here. There's a ball joint in here that allow the figure to move from side to side, lean left and right, and bend forwards and backwards. But there's another one at the waist. Again, it does exactly the same thing, allow you to move side to side, turn from left to right, and of course bend forwards and backwards. When you use these both together, you can actually get a really good range of motion out of these two joints combined. There's more ball joints in the hips, neatly disguised by the rubber pants there that we see. The legs will kick out to the side. You can kind of jostle them a little bit to get them to move from side to side a little bit as well, but there's not a huge range of motion there, to be honest. But the legs will kick forwards and backwards. There's a double joint at the knee, so you can kick that lower leg all the way back there. And then at the ankle, there's a couple of different joints which are a bit unusual. There seems to be a swivel at the very top of the ankle, and then there seems to be this sort of pivot at the bottom of the ankle that will allow the foot to move from side to side, sort of lean left and right, and of course hinge up and down. And then finally, there is a toe cut as well. Now, as a rule, I tend to be fairly critical of this series from McFarlane Toys because they tend to be quite light on their accessories. Yes, you usually get a trading card and you get a display stand, and it's the same display stand for every figure regardless of scale. But here we actually have a number of cool accessories. We have two alternative closed fist hands, his grapple gun, and batarang. This is a pretty complete collection for this version of the character, and I think they've done a really nice job here. Of all of these pieces, the batarang is my absolute favourite. I love how they've sculpted this to be pretty much exactly what we see in the '89 Batman film, so I'm guessing they recycle that prop in this new film. Now, this is all painted in one metallic silver. I'm not sure if that's true to what we see in the new film. It's hard to say at this point, but in terms of the sculpting, this is absolutely fantastic. He has no issues holding it as well. It's a nice tight grip. It actually molds to his fingers perfectly here as well, and I think it looks really, really cool when you put him in these different kind of displays as well. Likewise with the grapple gun, again, it looks to be pretty authentic to what we saw on screen all those years ago in terms of the mould. It is once again produced in that metallic sort of silver paint. As I said, I can't comment on whether that's accurate or not at this point until the film comes out, but it still looks pretty attractive and quite nice. And I think this is kind of a difficult prop for toy companies because it doesn't really have a natural grip. There's no sort of like a finger trigger that it can just fit into a figure's grip nice and easily, but they've managed to do a pretty decent job, and it actually will fit in either hand, either gripping hand that this figure comes with, so you can hold it left or right-handed if you like. And I must admit, even though it's such a little thing, I'm really pleased that it has these alternate closed fist hands. These look absolutely fantastic. I love just having these two fists just up here like he's ready for a punch up. I think it looks great. This is really effective. It adds a lot of attitude and charisma to this figure. It's hard to articulate why that is, but it just looks fantastic. Okay, so for a scale comparison, here he is standing next to the NECA 1989 version of the same character. This is the Michael Keaton Batman. As you can see, very distinct differences. I'd say that the McFarlane Toys is actually taller, even though they're both in the 7-inch scale, but obviously he stands a lot taller. It definitely has more of a plastic feel, whereas the NECA Toys version obviously has more of a rubber texture to the costume, but you can see they look vastly different to one another here. And here he is next to the Batfleck version of the character from the same film. So this is also in the Flash line as well. This is the other Batman you can pick up, and you can see obviously their two costumes are very, very different, although the approach is kind of similar, as you can see with the cloth cape there. And stay tuned for this one, because I will be posting a review of this figure soon. And now here he is next to Robert Pattinson's The Batman. Again, you can see huge differences here. I think the key difference is the fact that the Pattinson Batman had that rubber cape, which really held it back a little bit, so you can see they've obviously improved on that offering this time around. And then, just to shake things up, here he is standing next to the Arkham Asylum version of Batman. And then finally, we have the comic book version taken from the Hush 2-pack, and for my money, probably the worst or the most disappointing of all these Batman figures that McFarlane Toys has produced. Okay, so there you have it. Now, I did open with the criticism saying that I wasn't overly impressed with this likeness. The sculpting there just is a little bit soft for my liking. But other than that, I have to say I've been tremendously impressed with this figure. I'd even go as far as to say that this is probably my favourite Batman from all of McFarlane Toys' offering so far. I love this. I think the articulation is fantastic. I love having that extra joint in the shoulder there that allows the arms to really come forwards and pop out backwards in that butterfly wing. I think that's fantastic. I love the extra accessories that he comes with. It just feels a little bit more robust, it's a little bit more fun, and definitely more distinct to this version of the character. There's some nice paint apps on the boots there as well to give it a little bit more texture, and I love this cape. I think it works fantastically. I love that it's just big enough to wrap around him. I love that it's made of cotton, so it's very flexible. I just think this is a really, really awesome figure. For me, this is an easy 4 stars. I was actually very tempted to give it 5 because I really, really love it so much, but I felt like I couldn't really do that. I've got to maintain some sort of standards, and yeah, obviously that likeness does let it down a little bit. Plus also some of the joints look very plastic-like, and it would have been nice if there'd been maybe some more attempts at paint apps throughout the rest of the body there. But really, that's nitpicking. It's very, very minor things. Overall, I have to say, I love this figure. I think they've done a fantastic job, and it's probably, as I said, it's the best Batman McFarlane Toys has produced, and probably one of the best figures they've produced in a very long time. For me, this is really up there, and I think in recent months, I've definitely seen McFarlane Toys really up their game, and they're really doing fantastic stuff these days. So I hope this is another sign of things to come, because they're really hitting their markers now. So well done, McFarlane Toys. I love this. This is a fantastic addition to your lineup. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.